In just 24 hours, NATO vanished from the battlefield. A French commander surrendered. Over 1,200 Ukrainian soldiers were killed, and 352 Russian kamikaze drones lit up the sky above Kiev. The world was stunned. Ukraine was collapsing. What's unfolding in Sumy is not just another battle. It's a question mark looming over the entire Eastern European order. Sumy, the gateway to northeastern Ukraine, is beginning to mirror Avdiivka, Severodonetsk, Bakhmut. Only this time, it could be the breaking point. Russia is no longer pretending. They are not probing. They are finishing it. And in this game of power, Ukraine is not just losing land. It's losing its place in the strategy of the very allies who once vowed, "You won't stand alone." A French commander was captured alive, exposing the uncomfortable truth. NATO had boots on the ground. But the moment that truth came to light, NATO pulled out. Training centers were obliterated. Western advisors vanished without a word. So what's really going on? Was NATO never prepared to fight to the end? Or did Russia just play a masterstroke, forcing the West to retreat without firing a single extra shot? And more crucially, what is left of Ukraine? A country depleted of manpower, fragmented by broken logistics, and led by a government trapped between political crisis and assassination threats. Now comes the ultimate question. Is Sumy the true objective, or just the perfect bait? Let's break down Russia's every move. Let's uncover NATO's silent withdrawal. And let's zoom out to reveal the bigger picture. A new order quietly rising from the ashes of Ukraine. Like, share, and subscribe. Because what comes next will be far more terrifying than anything you've imagined. On the night of the 25th of June, the Russian Ministry of Defense released a wave of photos and footage documenting a blitzkrieg assault on Sumy, a critical province hugging Ukraine's northeastern border. What we saw wasn't a mere provocation. It was a full-spectrum offensive. Artillery barrages, suicide drones, attack helicopters, and precision-guided missiles, launched in synchronized waves. The opening strikes slammed into strategic towns like Serodina Buda, Shalihin, and Shostka, once considered the first defensive belt against Russian incursions. But within mere hours, these lines were breached. Some outposts were abandoned. Others found themselves encircled. For the first time this year, Russian forces skipped reconnaissance. They struck with chilling precision, as if they already knew the layout, who was where, and which positions to erase first. What shocked international observers most was the speed. Within 12 hours, over 200 square kilometers had changed hands. But this wasn't just about territory. It was a message. Russia was no longer trying to pressure Ukraine. It was clearing the way. In Andriivka, Russian mechanized units emerged simultaneously from 3 directions, a maneuver that only confirmed they controlled the terrain completely. Jan 2 and Monia 2 loitering munitions pierced through Ukraine's air defenses, striking command centers and frontline supply hubs with surgical accuracy. There was no tug-of-war, just a hasty Ukrainian retreat. Sumy is no longer just a stronghold. It's becoming a symbol of collapsing tactics step by step. And here's the most chilling part. This is only the opening act. In Russia's escalation strategy, the decisive weapon is not tanks, not cruise missiles, it's suicide drones. On the night of the 24th of June, over 350 FPV and long-range kamikaze drones launched in coordinated waves, not just hitting the front lines, but cutting deep into Ukraine's logistical arteries. The epicenter? Desna, once one of Ukraine's largest military training hubs, a facility where NATO trained thousands of troops. Video released by Russia's MOD showed Su-34 bombers dropping Grom smart bombs, in tandem with Jan 2 drones, hitting the training grounds, barracks, and logistics depots dead-on. The result wasn't just fiery explosions. It was total annihilation of Ukraine's military brain. Drone control centers, weapons assembly plants, and key transit nodes all turned to ash. Jan 2 drones served as precision-guided suicide units, striking with optical tracking. Meanwhile, Monia 2 drones, fixed-wing, bomb-laden, bunker-busting, penetrated reinforced concrete to obliterate underground ammo stores and shelters. The impact? Over 80% of the rear infrastructure in Sumy and Kharkiv was temporarily paralyzed. This wasn't just material destruction. It was psychological warfare. Ukrainian soldiers at the front knew there was nowhere safe to retreat. And Western advisors knew there was nowhere safe to stay. Russia wasn't just dismantling defenses. They were shattering the illusion that Ukraine's rear lines were untouchable. Just hours after Russia's deep strikes shattered Sumi's defensive lines, a second wave appeared over Ukraine. Not bombers, but FPV kamikaze drones, hundreds of them, descending upon the very heart of Ukraine's rear. On the night of the 24th of June, Kiev's air defenses were overwhelmed. Sirens screamed across the capital. Civilians scrambled into bunkers, panic spreading like wildfire. But this wasn't a typical air raid. It was a precision drone campaign designed to destroy not cities, but the arteries keeping Ukraine's military alive. 352 kamikaze drones, an unprecedented number, launched from multiple directions. Some flew low, hugging terrain to avoid radar. Others used optical guidance to evade electronic jamming. The goal wasn't chaos. It was surgical decapitation of Ukraine's military logistics. Desna, the once proud NATO-aligned training hub, was engulfed in flames. Su-34S dropped Grom smart bombs. Then Monia 2 drones followed up, finishing what remained, destroying control towers, airstrips, and drone command posts. Eyewitnesses described it simply: the ground shook. Smoke rose hundreds of meters into the air. It felt like an earthquake, but it was just the beginning. South of Kharkiv, FPV drones hunted Ukrainian supply convoys. Infrared footage showed drones diving into trucks and armored vehicles, turning routine logistics into a battlefield of flames. This wasn't harassment. It was amputation severing the limbs of a tired army. At Chernihiv, a Ukrainian command post was obliterated mid-meeting. No alarms, no time to react. 30 seconds and the entire signal network went dark. Why drones instead of missiles? Because drones are cheaper, faster, harder to detect, and infinitely more terrifying. You never know when they'll appear, or what they'll target next. And worst of all, they never stop. Hours after Russian kamikaze drones rained down on Ukraine's training centers, a strange silence began to settle over the West. No official statements, no press briefings, only a series of quiet decisions made in the dark. On the evening of the 25th of June, European military sources confirmed UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer had issued an emergency withdrawal order. All British military advisors embedded with frontline Ukrainian units were to evacuate immediately. The order came just hours after Desna NATO's pride was reduced to rubble. Desna wasn't a random target. It was the NATO standard training ground, where Western officers rotated in and out, teaching Ukrainian troops how to handle advanced Western weapons. With Desna gone, a symbol of support fell with it. But the real shock came on the ground. Ukrainian soldier revealed they had no warning. Western advisors vanished overnight. Barracks once full of activity were eerily silent the next morning. Rooms emptied, laptops removed, not a trace left behind, except a chilling emptiness. Shortly after, German and Dutch sources confirmed NATO's Advanced Frontline Training Program had been suspended indefinitely. The official reason: an insecure security environment. The real reason, according to military analysts? Fear of being caught in the death spiral Russia had unleashed. The image of NATO officers slipping away in silence stood in stark contrast to their previous declarations. We will stay until the end. But what exactly is the end? Until they're hit? Or until their presence becomes too visible? A captured French officer in Sumy was a slap in the face to NATO's claim of non-involvement. When the story broke, official channels in France, the UK, and the US went dark. No confirmations, no denials, no answers to the only question that mattered. Is NATO fighting in Ukraine? The answer, perhaps, lies not in words, but in actions. Within 48 hours of the Desna strike, at least 5 other training centers in Zhytomyr, Chernihiv, Kharkiv, Sumy, and Vinnytsia were either destroyed or forced to shut down. These were once regular haunts for Western advisors. Now, they're smoking ruins. No one believes this was a coincidence. Russia wasn't targeting Ukraine's ragged front lines. It was decapitating the brain, the very system Western strategists had bet on to keep Ukraine standing. And once the brain is gone, all that's left is a body lurching blindly through the dark. In the chaos of Ukraine's collapsing lines, a grimmer truth began to surface. Beneath the rubble, among twisted drone parts and shattered equipment, lay the bodies of men with no flag and unfamiliar insignia. On the 30th of June, Russia's Ministry of Defense announced that 2 foreign fighters had been killed on the outskirts of Sumy. Their identities: Benjamin Joseph, UK, and Rayo Bogus, USA. Both former regular soldiers, now volunteers fighting for Ukraine. But it wasn't their deaths that shocked the world. It was what they carried. Inside their packs: satellite-linked NATO navigation units, night vision goggles with Western serial codes, tactical maps printed in English and French, the kind even most Ukrainian officers had never seen. These weren't aid workers. They were fully integrated operatives in a covert chain of command, trained, equipped, and directed by NATO, but labeled non-governmental to avoid accountability. Since the war began, thousands of such fighters had poured into Ukraine under vague labels: humanitarian supporters, defenders of democracy, or the romanticized media term, freedom fighters. But war is the ultimate truth teller. When their corpses are pulled from smoking craters, the facade burns away. What remains? Professionally trained, heavily armed soldiers, operating with tactics indistinguishable from Western special forces. Why does the West need them? Because they're a gray force. They're not bound by treaties. Their deaths don't require official responses. If captured, they're rogue actors. They're tools the West can use and deny. But now, that game is backfiring. In Kharkiv, a Polish mercenary unit abandoned their post after a Russian drone strike took out their radar station. Ukrainian soldiers on the ground reported. They didn't say a word. They just disappeared. The next day, the entire defensive position fell without a fight. With their exit, the consequences rippled. Western gear demining kits, thermal scopes, satellite links were left behind, unused. No operators. No technicians. Ukrainian troops unfamiliar with Western hardware were left technologically blind. And worse, it wasn't just an equipment problem. It was a psychological rupture. As mercenaries began to fall, vanish, or withdraw, a silent wave of desertion began spreading through Ukrainian ranks. Western volunteers switched from fighting to blaming. Underground forums leaked. Hundreds of foreign fighters had filed for repatriation in the last 3 weeks. No public statements. But the message was clear. Ukraine was no longer the place to prove your ideals. And as they left, Western media changed tone. Gone were the glowing headlines of heroes without borders. In came terms like unexpected losses, severe setbacks, and strategic reassessment. Behind closed doors, EU nations began capping military volunteer applications. Some went further, outright banning their citizens from taking arms abroad. They didn't want more Benjamins or Rios appearing in Russian videos. Undeniable evidence in a war they swore they weren't fighting. While the West debated the next aid package, Russia quietly unleashed a weapon so advanced, so silent, that even its name sent chills through defense ministries in Brussels. Oresnik. It's not loud like the Iskander, not as famous as Caliber, but Oresnik, Russia's new generation cruise missile, isn't built for now. It's a weapon of the future, already in use today. According to Russia's Ministry of Defense, Oresnik is a third-generation, medium-range cruise missile equipped with AI navigation, in-flight target switching, multi-target smart warheads capable of hitting several objectives within a 15 kilometers radius. Its first known deployment, the obliteration of a Western weapons depot in Vinnytsia, a site recently stocked with NATO arms. The precision was so surgical, analysts suspect Russia was not relying on traditional satellite imagery, but on a real-time sensor and UAV network coordinated via ground radar and drone reconnaissance. What makes Oresnik different? A range of over 2,000 kilometers. Electronic stealth. It absorbs radar signals and auto-adjusts its flight path when detected. It doesn't fly a fixed path. It evades like a living creature. The Pentagon once warned, if Russia mass-produces Oresnik, NATO's entire Eastern defense architecture will need a redesign. But there's more. Oresnik isn't limited to land-based launchers. It can be fired from mobile trucks or submarines, meaning it can strike anytime, from anywhere, and hit any weak point in NATO's support lines. Already, Oresnik has been deployed to the Black Sea, aboard Admiral Grigorovich-class frigates. A direct message. Russia is ready to press against NATO borders without firing a warning shot. Why is Oresnik more dangerous than anything we've seen? Because it's not just a weapon. It's a strategic statement. If Iskander is brute force, Oresnik is cold intelligence. If Caliber is deterrence, Oresnik is non-negotiable punishment. And above all, It shatters the illusion that Russia is weak, crippled by sanctions, technologically isolated. Its very presence forces a reckoning. Ukraine may never be able to stop this missile, and NATO, like it or not, must now reconsider its every forward footprint. Because any nation too deep in support for Ukraine may find Oresnik at its doorstep without a single warning. From kamikaze drones to decapitation strikes, from NATO's silent retreat to the unmasking of Western mercenaries, from tactical distractions to Oresnik's arrival, one thing is now clear. The war in Ukraine has entered a new phase. No more illusions. No more halfway measures. No more pretending. Russia is no longer just advancing on maps. It is advancing on Western assumptions, tearing apart the myths of humanitarian support, non-direct involvement, and strategic stability. Each suicide drone, each precision missile, each Fallen Training Center, delivers a single, cold message. The game is over. Step back, or be broken. Meanwhile, Ukraine, though still brave, still defiant, is running out of breath. In a war where unmanned weapons cut deeper than bullets, it's not just blood that's being lost. It's faith, momentum, and above all trust. Sumy, once a regional capital, is now the symbol of a collapsing strategy where resilience, sacrifice, and alliance are being stretched to their limits. So what comes next? Will Russia stop at Sumy? Or is this only the beginning? Can Ukraine still hold the line? Or is it being isolated slowly, methodically? Will the West continue pouring in money and hope? Or are exit strategies already being drawn behind closed doors? Because in this geopolitical chessboard, every move now conceals the birth of a new crisis. ATU. Subscribe, share, stay awake, because what's coming won't stop at Ukraine.